Hey guys, tonight we drift into the still hush of Imperial China, behind the immense red walls of the Forbidden City. Imagine the stone courtyards, cool to the touch, stretched out beneath the early morning stars before any bells have rung. Before the rustle of silk or the echo of sandals on brick, you're standing at the edge of one of history's most secretive, most orderly places. And yet, even here before the Emperor yawns, before the palace awakes, someone is already working. You hear it, maybe, the soft creak of a gate hinge being tested, a brush sweeping dust from a threshold that will never be seen by common eyes, a low murmur as water is poured from an earthen jar. These aren't ghosts, they're eunuchs, men who gave up everything to serve the palace, and who now move in, the hours before dawn, like shadows with purpose. You probably wouldn't survive a week in their shoes. But for tonight, you're safe. Just a quiet visitor, invisible to the candlelight and forgotten by time. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The stone beneath your feet is cold and smooth. You glide through a walkway lined with cypress and yellow-glazed tiles. No footsteps echo, not yet. The air is thick with stillness, like the palace is holding its breath. High above, carved eaves and gold-tipped roofs shimmer faintly beneath the sky's last stars. A lone figure passes ahead of you, holding a long-handled lantern with a patterned screen. The light inside flickers quietly, casting a soft yellow glow across the curved walkway. He doesn't see you. He's too focused. He pauses, straightens a ceremonial tassel that's hanging crooked from a painted post, then continues on without a sound. This is his domain, not by birthright, not by inheritance, but by relentless, invisible labor. While others slept, this eunuch prepared. He woke before the first bird's cry. He washed without complaint in the icy water poured from ceramic urns. He dressed himself in a plain robe, perfectly folded, no wrinkles, because his presence must never distract, only complement. He knows the pattern of sunrise by heart. Somewhere beyond the hall of supreme harmony, the emperor sleeps under layers of embroidered bedding, dreaming of immortality, or taxes, or maybe just steamed dumplings. But he dreams securely, because the palace machine is already in motion. And eunuchs are the gears that turn first. It's not just one man. In tucked-away corners of the city, they're everywhere. In kitchens, someone is already grinding ginger into paste with the rhythm of a quiet prayer. Near the temple of ancestors, another eunuch gently rearranges incense trays, correcting one that had been shifted an inch by yesterday's gust of wind. Precision matters. Nothing is left to chance in the emperor's shadow. And then there are those whose duties are quieter still. You see them crouched behind latticed windows, inspecting calligraphy brushes for stray bristles. One holds a teacup to the light, turns it slowly, and spots a single speck of dust clinging to the porcelain glaze. That will not do. He polishes it with a cloth worn, nearly transparent from decades of scrubbing. Some of the younger eunuchs are nervous. It's their first time serving during the morning ritual. Their hands shake as they arrange crimson silk sashes on the ceremonial dressing stand. One slips a jade button into its carved slot, breathes deeply, and checks it again. The older eunuchs don't say a word. They simply nod just once if things are correct, and if they're not, there is no shouting, only the terrifying weight of silence. Back in the outer corridor, a pair of eunuchs in charcoal robes walk with synchronized steps. They pause by a doorway, exchange a glance, and begin to roll back a set of paper screens. Light spills into the room like water, splashing across a floor of polished stone. The chamber glows. Still, the silence holds. A heron cries faintly in the distance. Above you, in a shadowed alcove, wind chimes, shaped like bronze dragons, stir in the breeze. Not enough to clang, just enough to murmur. The palace seems to sigh. Day is coming, and yet time in the Forbidden City is not measured by the sun alone. It's measured by the soft rituals of service, a click of a brush stand being placed just so, the rustle of lacquered paper as scrolls are fanned out in precise sequence. All of this begins before breakfast, before chatter, before ceremony. The eunuchs prepare the palace the way monks prepare for prayer, with devotion, silence, and layers of meaning folded into each movement. Historians still argue whether the eunuchs held true power or simply proximity to it. Were they servants or puppeteers, instruments or operators? The truth, as always, floats somewhere in between. What's clear is that their presence made the palace breathe. One last corridor leads you toward the inner chambers. You hear the first distant sound of life, a gong, soft and slow, rippling outward like circles in a pool. It's time. The city stirs. But the eunuchs have already been awake for hours. They melt into the backdrop as if they'd never been there at all. You hear it before you see it, the low gong of a bell echoing across the stone courtyards of the Forbidden City. It's still early dawn, hasn't broken fully, but the palace is already stirring. There's no such thing as sleeping in when you serve behind the vermilion walls. Not if you're a eunuch. Not if you want to stay invisible, useful, and alive. The bell means one thing: ritual is coming. Ceremonies before breakfast. And no, not the loud, dramatic kind, with trumpets or processions. These are the quiet ceremonies. The ones that happen while most of the city is still stretching under its blankets, and they require everything to go just right. You slip out from your tiny shared quarters, just a mattress tucked near the laundry courtyard, and straighten your robe in the half-light. The robe's a little too thin for this time of year, but complaining isn't in your job description. You pat your hair down, a bowl cut, simple and shaved close. No vanity allowed here. The first task of the day, incense and water bowls. The emperor's private quarters must be perfectly prepared for his waking. Not nice, not neat, perfect. The coals for heating water must be hot but not roaring. The towels, folded in a precise square, stacked left to right by rank and purpose. The incense must be lit at the exact time. Too early, and it burns away before he arrives. Too late, and he smells cold ash. You walk briskly past larger courtyards where higher-ranking eunuchs issue hushed commands. No one shouts in the palace. Even discipline is quiet. Just a flick of the sleeve, a raised eyebrow, a curt nod toward the wooden paddle that means your mistake will be handled later. Still, the ceremony is beautiful. In the hall of mental cultivation, a line of eunuchs glide into position like silent actors in a play no outsider ever watches. One carries warm water, another the toothbrush, a thin stick frayed at one end. Another holds silk napkins. A fourth carries the emperor's underrobe, warmed by wrapping it around a brazier for the last hour. It's all part of a slow, deliberate ballet one, where the dancers are never acknowledged. By the time the emperor stirs from sleep, the entire machine is humming. The courtyards are swept, slippers warmed, his morning tonic ginseng root and chrysanthemum steeped, swirled, and cooled to exactly the right temperature. The doctor is waiting nearby, just in case, and you're crouched by the door, holding the tray of scrolls that tell him which ministers await today. If you're lucky, you won't be noticed, not because you've failed, but because you've succeeded so perfectly you've become part of the palace's architecture, like a lamp, like the wall, there, functioning, without drawing breath or comment. Historians still argue whether eunuchs truly enjoyed this life of ritual, or if they simply resigned themselves to it out of necessity. Some records speak of devotion, of monks who treated the emperor's morning routine as a kind of prayer. Others suggest a more cynical scene: men so terrified of misstepping that they obsessed over every brushstroke of every morning scroll. But either way, the outcome is the same. The emperor rises, steps into his slippers, and greets the world as though it were always perfectly composed. And the eunuchs, already melting back into the corridor's shadows, preparing for the next invisible performance. There's a dignity to it, or at least a rhythm. Wake before the sun, serve before you speak, slip through stone corridors with soft shoes and softer voices. Let the emperor take credit for a morning that would fall apart without your quiet choreography. Later, after breakfast, when the palace had shifted into full bureaucratic gear, you might sneak a moment to sip leftover tea from a bronze cup you'll never call your own. You might even exchange a whisper with another servant, trading jokes about how slowly the royal astrologer walks. You might laugh, but only with your eyes, because the palace never truly sleeps. And in a place where silence is safer than wit, you keep your ceremonies close, and your secrets closer, and you never ever let the incense burn too long. Now that we've seen them at work, let's linger a moment longer and ask, who were they really? The word eunuch often brings a wince or a whisper, a term tucked away in dusty textbooks and drama scripts, usually followed by footnotes or jokes. But in Imperial China, eunuchs weren't just historical footnotes. They were everywhere essential to the heartbeat of palace life, even when barely spoken of in official records. Eunuchs were, quite literally, men altered by force or choice. Some were enslaved boys from distant provinces. Others were poor young men whose families saw in castration a strange path to status, food, or safety. A few, believe it or not, volunteered, because the forbidden city with its gold-tipped roofs, its echoing courtyards, its precise rituals offered something more valuable than freedom: proximity to power. The process itself what made them. Eunuchs was brutal. No ceremony, no blessing, just a knife, a bowl, and a prayer that the bleeding would stop in time. If it didn't, you died. If it did, you were cleansed and considered trustworthy enough to serve among women, in the emperor's private chambers, or in roles where temptations must be avoided. At least, that was the logic. But the reality, far more complicated. These men were outsiders even as they lived inside the empire's most sacred spaces. They could never marry. They could never have children. Most could never leave. They belonged to the palace, body and soul. And yet, paradoxically, some became immensely wealthy. They wore silk, lived in inner-city quarters, and were honored with titles and tombs. Others, meanwhile, toiled for decades without rising a single step. Historians often try to categorize them as loyal servants, dangerous schemers, victims, or manipulators. But those labels don't quite hold. Imagine being neither man nor woman in a society that prized lineage, masculinity, and heirs. Imagine existing inside that carefully painted line between invisibility and indispensability. A eunuch was expected to be helpful but not seen, clever but not ambitious, devoted but not too powerful. A walking contradiction in embroidered slippers. Some eunuchs were fiercely religious, others shrewdly political. Some genuinely believed their purpose was divine service. Others saw it as survival, that and all of them, regardless of how they felt about their fate, had to master the quiet arts of palace life: timing, memory, cleanliness, hierarchy, humility, how to carry a porcelain teacup without clinking, how to sweep without being seen, how to interpret the emperor's mood by the way he put on his robe, and perhaps most importantly, how to remain utterly forgettable when danger came near. Over the centuries, there were eunuchs who changed the course of dynasties, who funded temples, who built schools, who overreached and paid dearly. But there were also thousands more who simply kept the palace running. They swept, they served, they watched history unfold in silence, and then they were gone. No heirs, no monuments, only faint records, whispering their names in the margins. Tonight, you remember them not as punchlines or curiosities, but as human beings who shaped an empire from the shadows. Let's step away from the emperor's bedchamber now, his morning routine complete, his day underway, and walk deeper into the palace, where the quieter, more mundane magic unfolds. If the emperor is the flame, these eunuchs are the oil, silent, necessary, easily forgotten. And among them, the rhythm of daily life continues: laundry, lanterns, and foot powder. First, the laundry. You might imagine silk robes being gently rinsed in spring-fed pools by singing attendants, but the reality, far more workmanlike. In a courtyard tucked behind the Hall of Supreme Harmony, rows of steaming basins wait, not decorative, functional: scalding water, soap root paste, and calloused hands. Eunuchs aren't just attendants, they're cleaners, dyers, and fabric whisperers. The imperial family goes through a mountain of clothing each day: one robe for early audience, another for midday tea, another for a short walk in the garden. And heaven help you if a hem is stained or a sleeve has a wrinkle. You wash everything by hand. Rub with salted lemon peel to remove the stains. Rinse in hot water drawn before dawn. Hang in shadow, not sun. Too much light ruins the colors. You do this knowing full well that if a stitch comes loose, it could be your neck, not the robes. That's on the line. Then there are the lanterns. At nightfall, a hush settles over the courtyards, but the forbidden city never goes completely dark. 1,000 paper lanterns must be lit. Not too early. Candle wax is expensive. Not too late. The emperor must never find himself fumbling in shadow. The wicks are made of mulberry bark, the oil rendered from sesame, and each flame must be placed with a steady hand. Dripping wax, smoke, or even a too bright flicker could mean reprimand. There's even a eunuch assigned to the imperial shadows, literally. His job is to stand in certain corridors to test whether the lantern glow is too harsh against the lacquered walls. If it is, the wick is trimmed, the lantern moved, and finally, foot powder. Yes, foot powder. The palace is vast, and its rituals endless. Feet get sore, and nothing is more humiliating than hearing the emperor complain of discomfort. So, deep in one of the many storage rooms, shelves are lined with tiny silk sachets filled with crushed mint, dried chrysanthemum petals, ground alum, and a trace of powdered sandalwood. Every evening, a eunuch carefully replaces the sachets in each of the emperor's slippers, not just his, the empress's, the concubines, the favored nephews, even the shoes of the visiting Korean envoys, if protocol demands it. It's a gesture that smells of luxury. But to the eunuch, it's just another item on the scroll of daily tasks, another thing to check off, another invisible service that keeps the empire's wheels turning, quietly, without praise. None of these things, washing robes, trimming lanterns, stuffing slippers, will ever be written into the grand histories. No poet sings of them, no chronicler records who measured the bathwater, who swept the hair from the jade comb, who folded the handkerchiefs with the dragon embroidery facing up. But this is how the palace endured, not with declarations, but with details, and in every one of those details, there is a unicorn scene, uncelebrated, and yet utterly essential. So tonight, as you drift deeper into sleep, think of them. Not the rulers who posed for scrolls and carved their names in stone, but the men who lit the way, who folded the linens, who sprinkled mint beneath the royal toes, and never expected thanks, the ones who made sure, quietly, that the palace never missed a beat.